Recording the application.
Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the May 17th, 2022 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals, Zoning. Present today here are John Bennett, Allison Grass, and Bill Goodwin and Jeff Tibbles. Present from the planning staff are Lee Batchelder and Penny Ashby. These proceedings are being recorded, and we ask that those who speak identify themselves for the record. We will conduct this meeting in usual fashion. We will first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, usually the Board of Zoning Appeals treats the matter as being uncontested and passes it as a matter of course. If, however, the city recommends against the application or there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We will then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals Zoning has the authority to do these three things. Number one, hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Number two, grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. And number three, grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54-924 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by majority vote of the members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present and qualified to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. First item on our agenda this evening is the review of the minutes and deferred applications from previously advertised BZA-Z agendas. So number one, review of the minutes of the May 3rd, 2022 board meeting. Do I hear a motion? Approve the minutes. Second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No opposed. Minutes are approved. Motion passes 4-0 unanimously. Number two, 8 Cleveland Street, North Central. TMS number 463-15-04-085. Application number 2205-17-A2. Request variance from section 54-301 to allow construction of a single-family residence with a 1-foot east side setback, a 3.5-foot west side setback, a 4.5-foot total side setback. 3 feet, 9 feet, 15 feet are required. The owner is Charleston Development Company, LLC. The applicant is represented by Julie O'Connor from American Vernacular. First of all, do we have anyone present here who is opposed to the application? If you are, I just ask you that you raise your hand. Okay, I see one in opposition, so let's hear from Ms. O'Connor.
Well, I can
maybe okay, go ahead.
introduce her because she has made changes to the plans.
This is a deferred application from last time, right?
Right, deferred application. And so this is a commercially zoned lot in North Central. It's proposed to have a single family residence on it. It's very narrow. The lot is 17, almost 18 feet wide at Cleveland Street. It gets a little bit wider as you go back, and it's 125 feet deep. So it's a very unusually shaped lot. And we talked about these properties to the east along King Street. They're commercially zoned, and there are plans that are that have been reviewed on the development of that property that's now vacant, this property right here. And then you've got residential to the west and to the north behind this lot. Here's the zoning map illustrating the commercial zoning that applies and the mixed use zoning on the corner, which is essentially is a commercial zoning category. Then you've got the residential zoning in the brown, representing where the most of the residences are located. Application form, the background information on the history of the property, photographs. So this is the house immediately to the west of the subject property. Another view of that house right here. And then here's a view of the lot looking straight back from Cleveland Street. This is a view of what the proposed development of that corner might be someday if they ever build it. Another survey of the property. This is the plan. And just a little bit about it. So we're dealing with setback variances on the sides only. Parking would be provided in the front off Cleveland Street. And then there's a rear yard behind the house. Originally, the house was 85 feet long on this lot, and now it's been reduced in depth to 65 feet long. So it's shrunk a good bit in that direction. And the size, overall size of the house has gone down as well. And so floor plans, these are the same floor plans you saw last week. And elevations. So these are where the changes have occurred. And we had the discussion last week, and there was some concern about the size of the house, impact it might have on the neighboring properties. So the architect has gone back and revised the plan to reduce the overall height of the roof. And this is pretty faint, but there's a line here that represents the former peak of the roof. Here's the back portion of the house back here had this tall gable, and the eave was a little bit higher back here. And then the front also has gone down just a little bit. So in the back, the eave or the peak of the roof is now shown at 31 feet to the peak of this roof right here on the ground. And before it was 35 feet. This is what I'm measuring. And then the eave, which had been up here before at 25 feet, now down to 22 feet. I got those measurements right. And so those are changes that have occurred. This is the other side view right here, showing faintly that outline of the previous roof right here. Then this is the rear elevation. So see that roof is been lowered pretty dramatically back here. So it's a modest two-story house that happens to be quite long and narrow because of the shape of the lot. But so I had asked for the original plan to be reduced in depth, and it never came to the board. The applicant agreed to do that. And then they presented what they presented last time. And with the concerns, there was a suggestion about possibly lowering the height of the roof and eave, and that was done. So this is back before you for your consideration tonight. And I think that's everything. Here's the view of that house next door, and that's it.
But does the city view this application favorably?
Yes, I had recommended approval. I don't think we'd heard from anybody last week prior to the meeting. But then there were folks that showed up and expressed some concerns. And so that's when I came up with the suggestion to alter the roof height. And but I still feel like they've got a legitimate case for a hardship and variance given the narrow width of this lot, and it is a residential use. So my recommendation is for approval with changes.
Thank you, Mr. Batchelder. All right, Mrs. O'Connell.
Now. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Batchelder, for explaining the whole project. So I don't have to say much, and I won't waste your time, because obviously we were here 2 weeks ago and presented our case at that time. At that time, as Mr. Batchelder said, the suggestion was made to try and lower the height of the structure to be more in keeping with the streetscape, and also to limit the impact on the adjacent properties. So we have done that, as he stated. We've lowered the rear roof and the main roof by 4 feet. And then the front section that's closest to the street went down about 2 feet, just because it's so narrow. We did lower the roof pitch. And so now that's at 29 foot 6 inches. So if you look at the streetscape, which is that last sheet, you can see that now it is more in line with the neighboring properties. The new house at 16A, Cleveland is taller than we are, and the proposed property at 6 Cleveland would be taller than us. But we are now sort of a little bit more in keeping, I guess, in terms of the height of the neighboring properties. And I think that was the goal of the board last time we were here, was to get that height down, which we've done. So we feel like we've addressed the concerns about alignment of the neighborhood. Of course, this is a residential use, which is within character. I did do a little research on size of houses on our block. And the size of houses ranges from 900 square feet to 1,750 square feet. And so we are right at 1746. So I don't think that we're outside of the realm of that neighborhood in terms of size either at this point. Erica Harrison is also here, so she was going to speak as well.
Just before you stop, just so that I can understand, the dotted lines here represent the height for the application as it was proposed 2 weeks ago, and now the depiction on 8 Cleveland Street shows that it's been lowered.
Exactly. The dotted lines are the last
iteration. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
Hello, my name is Erica Harrison. I practice here in Charleston, and I represent Charleston Development Company. Just to kind of walk through the hardship test, as we all know, this lot obviously is a significantly different type of lot. With the requirement of the setbacks is actually smaller in depth and for that particular setback. Additionally, as Julie was pointing out, we've done a lot of reduction already before we came to Board of Zoning and Appeals, but also as a result of the last hearing, we made some additional reductions. So we started out at 85 feet as the length, and we've reduced that by 20%. The height of the roofs has been reduced by 10%. And so as we continue to do these reductions, we're getting the product that is most compatible with the neighborhood. But most importantly, what's really, critical here is that the use is compatible with the street. It's compatible with the neighborhood because it is a residential use. As pointed out, it is zoned commercial, but however, it being inside a residential area, we decided that the most compatible and best use was to do a residential building. And based on the constraints of this property, you wouldn't see a property of this type of nature because all the lots are kind of compatible and same size, same shape. But this one is uniquely different from the other lots that are in the area. And so we feel as though that we've met the hardship test. We have moved the house inside. The recommendation was to set the house within inside the setbacks. And we've tried our best to maintain that framework. And so all we're asking is to be able to build this house with those minimum setbacks with that reduction. And we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Is there anybody else here who is in favor of this application who wishes to speak tonight? All right, I saw a hand raised in opposition, so please come up and state your name and address for the record.
My name's Christopher Manolenko. I live at 1B Francis, so that's the northwest property from the lot. I mentioned most of my concerns last time we were here in front of the board. The size of the property versus the lot. We actually are very appreciative that the drop down of 4 feet because we're in the back, because that property there, that house looks over our backyard and our sitting area. The only couple concerns that we did not bring up last time, which I couldn't see on the proposal and had a couple questions, was about water drainage and water runoff. For being such a small lot and such a large square footage of the house, I know it's only 40% coverage on the lot, but we just want to make sure that's being thought of too for the surrounding lots to make sure that the water goes out properly. I don't know if there are gutters on the proposal or some type of drainage, but that's kind of what we want to bring up today. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Anybody else here opposed to the application at 8 Cleveland Street? All right, the public hearing portion of the meeting is closed. Board members, any questions, discussion?
To review the information we received in opposition.
Sorry, did you want to let the applicant maybe? have
Oh,
a short
rebuttal. Do you want to rebut on the stormwater?
Obviously, we'll do our best to address those concerns, but we'll go through the permitting process, go through making sure that we carry our water. We've done several projects within the city, and we constantly are concerned about those. We actually developed a building at 2 Francis Street, and so we are aware of the issues there. So that's the building that we did back in 2008. And so we have a track record of making sure that we take care of the street.
Thank you. Any questions, discussions?
I was just asking about the letter we received. Do we need to discuss that or?
Well, certainly if you feel like you.
I didn't know if we were done that way or.
We can certainly talk about it. What
Like me to read this?
Sure.
This is dated Monday, May 16th. Dear Ms. Ashby, I recently met with several neighbors, and they voiced their concerns about the size of the structure proposed for 8 Cleveland Street. I want to know why the proposed structure is exempt from the carbon footprint that was established from the original house. Both houses recently rebuilt, number 12 and number 16 Cleveland Street, are in carbon footprint format. But me emphasize that I am not in agreement with the plan if it supersedes likable properties and is out of character to my property and the surrounding community. Size and design just doesn't fit. Small cottage with a side porch is what was there before, and that's what will be more suitable. I apologize for not taking the time to measure the lot size versus the structure sooner, but my health plus work did not permit. That is from Deborah Bryan. She lives next door on Cleveland Street.
Jen Cleveland.
10 Cleveland.
Yes.
So what we have here obviously is a vacant lot. And people who have vacant lots are allowed to build within what the parameters are, the zoning ordinance. And so what we have asked for is that differential in the use. And so residential uses of 2-story type houses that are larger than the format of what may have previously existed is normal course. And it's regularly seen. And I think all throughout the neighborhood, you'll see typologies that are different from what was originally there. You'll see typologies that are more modern in design and framework. You'll see rehabilitations, but what is the requirement to build something that no longer exists isn't necessarily the requirement underneath the ordinance. What we have here is what's a product that people can actually, utilize, and it's a modest house. We're essentially looking at, is the use compatible? The use is residential, and that's the use. And so the architectural direction that the person may prefer isn't actually the question. The question is whether or not is our use compatible, and that is a residential use. And so we decided to do a residential use on a commercially zoned lot. And I think that is really what is sustainable. It's sustainable for the neighborhood, and it transitions well from a lot that is actually zoned MU, and we'll have a much larger scaled project at that corner. So we are actually scaling ourselves down at stepping down from an MU project into a single family residence, where you'll have something next door that's multifamily and commercial. And so I think that we've addressed those concerns by planning for a single family residence on that site.
Further discussions, Lee, what is the process for obtaining a construction permit, and does it have a stormwater component in the city?
Well, I don't believe our stormwater department reviews plans for this type of building permit. I believe that the only review would be with us, with the building inspections folks who review applications for building code compliance, fire code compliance, and then the engineering division. And the engineering division really is responsible for making sure that the lot is not draining in a way that's going to, where the construction is going to adversely affect the neighboring property. So they're supposed to look at that and consider those issues if they feel like they're concerns.
So there is an opportunity for the city to review any stormwater issues.
Right.
And they must in order to process the permitting.
Right.
That addresses one of the primary lingering concern. Carbon footprint requirement noted in the email is necessarily. I think the application is greatly improved from the prior presentation. Working with the neighboring properties is commendable. better application than it was previously.
I also believe that effort to rescale the project and bring it in line with what's going on in the community make for a better site. And considering the fact that it could be used for other uses that would be more intrusive, it appears to be working within the framework of what's going on in the area. So
Motion?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion passes. The variance is granted 4-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, we're on to the new applications segment of the meeting.
Number 1, under new applications, 37C F Street on the west side, TMS number 463-03054.
That's deferred, actually. Yeah, we've got a few deferrals,
Yeah.
and this is one of them, the applicant deferred this.
About number 2.
She is ready to go.
Yeah.
All right, yes.
It might be worth noting the deferrals if there's anybody present who is waiting.
Okay, the application on 37C F Street on west side is deferred, so anyone who is here to speak in favor or against the application at 37C F Street, that matter will not be heard this evening, and you're excused.
We've got another one. And that is.
I see, number 5, okay. Number 5 is 1316 Julian Clark Road in Clark's Point. That application has also been deferred, so if anyone is here to speak in favor or is opposed to the application on 1316 Julian Clark Road, you can be excused. That won't be heard tonight. All right, so we're now at new applications. Number 2, 48 Poplar Street, North Central, TMS number 463-12-01-118. Application number 2205-17-B2, request special exception under section 54-110 to allow construction of a detached accessory building that extends a non-conforming 5-foot east side setback and a non-conforming 12-foot 3-inch side street setback, 9 feet, 25 feet required. Last variance from section 54-301 to allow construction of a detached accessory building garage with an 11.9 foot rear setback, 25 feet are required. Property is zoned SR2. Owners are Neil and Allison Donnelly. Applicant is Zorzukas Homes, George Zorzukas, Mr. Batchelder.
So this is a residential property, North Central. You can see it's a corner lot
On the corner of Poplar Street and South Henston Avenue. And the zoning map is shown here, and you can see there's this accessory building behind the main house. Aerial view of the property. Story house and this 1-story accessory building behind. So this is a proposal to replace that 1-story small storage shed with a new
accessory building. This is an elevation, front elevation of the building.
The existing building sits in this location on the lot. The survey shows that location. It's 10 feet wide by 34.5 feet long. And here's a view looking at the back of that carport. And the proposed accessory building is shown here. So some agendas did note that 11.9 foot rear setback. It's actually 4.9 feet. And I'll just continue on and explain the situation there. But so the only variances on the rear setback, the two side setbacks requests or special exceptions, as the existing shed is not conforming with respect to the side setbacks. So you can demolish a building and replace it with a new building that occupies the same footprint, and there's no issue. That's just a staff approval. Or you can expand that building footprint, and that's what they're doing here. So they're extending basically the non-conforming side setback and to create this 25 by 24 foot footprint for this accessory building. So that's a special exception for the section 54-110, where we deal in this situation with light and air impacts on adjoining properties. The variance in the back is necessary in order to meet or to have this building situated the way it's shown here, and 4.9 feet. And you might notice so this is an accessory building back here on the neighboring property, which actually, if I go back to this, you can see the main house up here. This is 63 Maple Street. And then they have that one-story building back at the rear of their lot behind 48 Poplar Street. So that's kind of the lay of the land up there. And this is a blow up of that site plan for the new building with the 5-foot setback, 4-foot 11 rear setback, and floor plan. So it's a garage storage area on the first floor, and then living space or conditioned floor area upstairs. And these elevations showing the building. Bills. And then letters of support. So we've got two letters. One is from the neighbor to the east. So the immediate neighbor on the east side, where the 5-foot side setback would be extended. And that property is 46 Poplar Street. That letter is on the right. Then on the left is the letter from the neighbor behind 48 Poplar at 63 Maple Street. So both have indicated here that they support the project. That concludes the presentation for that one. Again, light and air impacts are the main thing, and then there's the variance in the back. Not uncommon to have these accessory buildings situated close to the rear property line. So we think they meet the variance test and special exception requirements. Recommend approval.
All right. Anybody here who is opposed to this application this evening? If you are, just raise your hand. All right, nobody here is opposed. Are the owners here this evening? Is there anything you'd like to talk about with respect to your application?
You guys pretty much covered it.
With a city recommendation for approval and no opposition here this evening, do I hear a motion? Discussion, any questions? Move to approve.
Second.
Second, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No opposed. Motion passes. The variance is granted. And the special exception. Both, right? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Number 3 on the agenda for new applications, 107 Royal Assembly Drive in Beresford Hall, application number 2205-17-B3, TMS number 268-10-01-015, request variance from section 54-301 to allow an 8-foot fence along rear property line, 6-foot height limitation. zone PUD, Beresford Hall. Owners are Suzanne Fu and Laura Lee Brown. Applicant is Laura Lee Brown. Mr. Batchelder.
This is a property in the Kingwood Peninsula in the city of Charleston. It's located here on Royal Assembly Drive in a neighborhood called Beresford Hall.
This is a gated neighborhood, very nice homes off of Clements Ferry Road. And you can see the location of the subject property. It's kind of on the side of the neighborhood. The road, Royal Assembly Drive, extends back, and you see lots of homes on both sides of that street. And the neighborhood continues further, I guess it would be to the southwest, quite a ways, but this is the northeast end of the neighborhood. And then immediately to the north is another neighborhood. Bradbury Lane is a short street coming off Clements Ferry Road that provides access to those homes that are located along the marsh, along creek there. And the applicant is requesting the variance to allow an 8-foot fence to run along the back property line, their rear property line, where it butts the neighboring property in that neighboring residential community. Here's the aerial view of the property. So this is the house on that lot, and we've got some photographs of the lot. Zoning map. So here we have the subject property. So it's only along that rear property line where they're requesting the variance for the 8-foot fence. There is a home under construction on this neighboring property off of the neighboring street. And there's just other plans that are part of the application or the materials submitted with the application. And this, I've just highlighted the back property line to highlight the area where they'd like to build that taller fence. This is a view. This is the applicant's house right over here. And then this is the house under construction on the neighboring lot. And so houses are elevated because they're close to the marsh. And that's the situation here. And I think that is part of the reason that the applicant is requesting the variance. So here's a letter from the Design Review Board for that neighborhood, Beresford Hall, indicating that they've approved the privacy fence, the 8-foot privacy fence at the back property line of this lot. They have their DRB approval in their neighborhood. And then there was a time when I think the neighbor behind the property who's building the new house was objecting to the 8-foot fence. And it's my understanding, and Penny can confirm this, because I think Penny has talked to both the applicant and the neighboring property owner, that they have resolved their differences. And this is an email exchange that was sent to Penny to kind of share a part of that conversation that was had between those two property owners. And there anything else I'm missing, anything else I should add, but anyway, so it's our understanding that there's no objections to this application, that the concerns that the neighboring property owner had have been addressed. And so there's no objections to this request. And again, I said we're getting into a few more of these kinds of requests lately. And it doesn't bother me that this would be an 8-foot fence along this side. These homes are elevated, as you can see. So it's not out of character that much in this neighborhood because of that. If there's no objections, I'm perfectly happy to support the variance request.
Thank you, Lee. Is there anybody here who is in opposition to the 8-foot fence at 107 Royal Assembly Drive in Beresford Hall, Daniel Island? All right. Is the applicant here? Applicants are here. We need to hear from the applicants. Any questions or discussions? Do I hear a motion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Your motion passes. Your variance is granted. Thank you very much. Number 4 on our applications under new applications, 462 Cessna Avenue, Citadel Woods, TMS number 350-09-00-192. Application number 2205-17-B4. Request variance from section 54-301. Allow an 8-foot fence along rear property line, 6-foot height limitation. Zone DR9. Owners are Michael and Misty Walsh. Applicant is Misty Walsh. Mr. Batchelder.
So here we have another request.
For an 8-foot fence along the rear property line. In this case, this home in Citadel Woods backs up to the West Ashley Greenway.
And it's a situation that's very similar to some of the other ones we've had recently, where Greenway, which is the old railroad right of way, is elevated. And so when you're up on that path,
On the Greenway, you have a line of sight into the backyard. It's elevated above the yards that got it. And here, I guess this is an older photograph, but I understand from the applicant that the Dominion, who has a power line going through that greenway, has removed vegetation recently, so they've opened up the views even more. But this just illustrates the proximity of the house to the greenway and application, and here's some information. So we're only talking about the rear property line and building an 8-foot fence along that rear property line, not on the sides. And these are photographs to illustrate the line of sight issues. And I guess these were taken before the clearing, but you see the view from the greenway itself looking into the yard and the house. Then these were useful. So the circles indicate somebody walking on the greenway. And you can see the head of that person, of what must be a 6-foot fence right now, it looks like. More photographs, you see the person back here and back here. So as with the other requests for these kinds of fences along the greenway, I think they have a case for hardship, and I recommend approval.
there's no objections that we're aware of.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Batchelder. Anybody here to oppose the application on Cessna Avenue? If you are, raise your hand, please. All right, is the applicant here? All right, nobody is here to speak on this application. So do we have any discussion or any questions?
It's just a clarification.
Yes.
The applicant unfortunately got sick, so wasn't able to come and phoned to apologize.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ashley. Is there your motion? Second.
Second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No opposed. Motion passes. Variance passes. 4-0, and we are on our way. Number 6, 71 King, and I believe, Mr. Bennett, you must recuse yourself. That leaves us without a quorum on this agenda item, so I believe that must be deferred.
That's right.
71 King, we didn't have Mr. Morrison. We didn't know whether or not Mr. Morrison will be here or not. He's not here. We don't have enough members here to vote and make a legal determination tonight because we have a recusal.
I believe my father and I have, I believe you've done some work with my father.
But he's not here, you're here. My apologies.
Sorry, we'll see you in 2 weeks. that number 7 is deferred, excuse me, number 6 is deferred for 71 King. Number 7, I have to recuse myself. So if you will please just read the agenda item, Ms. Grass, and then I think we have another quick item here.
What's the process? Is there a different committee that would have a quorum?
It's the
that-
same board.
We will hopefully have a quorum of 4 or more who will vote on your application in 2 weeks.
Oh, I see. So there are other members that are missing tonight.
You're right.
And you won't know. Others.
Right, and we also are short one member right now. And so hopefully by the next meeting in 2 weeks, we'll have that new member on the board, approved by city council, seated on the board. So that would give us 7 people potentially with one recusal,
Six.
and 6 members, hopefully, and we could get 4 out of those. We don't know for sure, but we'll try and gauge that ahead of time as much as we can.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
And number 7, Central Park, TMS number 340-03-00-007, application number 2205-17-B7. Request variance from section 54-301 to allow construction of single-family residences on lots 1 through 38 that exceeds the 2.5-story height restriction for the SR1 single-family residential zone district. As the home's designed, drive-under garage constitutes a 3rd story under section 54-120, zoned SR1. Owner is Central Park Road LLC, applicant Lessman and Associates LLC. Did I pronounce that correctly?
So we're reading this into the record. Obviously, we can't hear it tonight because we don't have a
Form, but the applicant has made a request for a variance, and I've studied it, and we've met and we've discussed it, and there have been some neighbors that have provided some feedback concerns. And so in an effort to address those concerns, I requested that the applicant defer this matter tonight because one of the solutions that they proposed that I think is a reasonable solution, I think we just need to iron out the details of that solution. And so that's what this is about, is not wanting to hear it tonight, number 1, because we don't have a quorum, but number 2, we want to allow a little bit more time to work out those details. 2 weeks, bring this back for you. And the applicant is here. He can speak to anything that I might have missed.
Madam Chairwoman, thank you. Alice Leisman on behalf of the applicant. And as Mr. Batchelder said, there was a 1 letter that was submitted in opposition and brought up the issue that if you elevate the space underneath the house, again, this application would not be to exceed the height requirement. It would not be to have a 3-story house. It would just be that rather than just 6 feet under the house, there could be up to 8 feet of space. And so one of the concerns that was raised was that, well, what if someone comes later and tries to convert that to a ADU? So we're discussing potential deed restriction, and the applicant's willing to do a deed restriction to prevent that from happening. And the city and Mr. Batchelder and the applicant will be reviewing that language to come up to make sure that that language would be appropriate. And just wanted to express to you all that we were here and ready to go forward, but obviously there's a quorum issue, and wanted just to express with the city the reason why we'd be taking that additional time. So thank you.
I need to make a motion since
You
us to
could
make a
just,
motion
as the
for
chair, you
deferral.
could just direct that this matter will be deferred, I think. That
All
would
right,
make
so
sense.
yeah, it'll be deferred until the next meeting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next up on our agenda is item B8, 2 Longitude Lane, Charlestown, TMS number 458-13-01-124, application number 2205-17-BA. Request variance from section 54-301 to allow construction of a single-family residence with a 3-foot west side setback and 49% lot occupancy, 7 feet required, 35% limitation, zoned SR-5. Owner applicant is Allison Brewer. Mr. Batchelor.
So 2 Longitude Lane is a vacant lot, residentially zoned property south of Trad Street. Situated here, this is Longitude Lane right here. This is East Bay Street. So this lot is situated behind an existing house on East Bay Street, and you'll see that house in the yard on the south side. And then you see this long, narrow lot that extends out to Longitude Lane. That provides access to the back of another East Bay Street property right here. So there's a lot going on, a lot of lot shapes right there, and homes that are, as you'll see, are very tightly packed together. Here's an aerial view of the existing conditions. A lot, which is, as I said, vacant right now. And I don't believe that there was I don't want to say that because that goes back a long time, but there hasn't been a lot or a building on this lot for a long time, many years. Maybe there was at one time, I don't know, but here's the zoning map, and this really begins to illustrate the building footprints that you have in the lot configurations in that area along East Bay Street, Longitude, and Trad Street at that end of the block. And one thing I'll point out, one of the requests that they have tonight is a variance request to exceed the 35% lot occupancy limitation. That's the percentage of the lot that can be occupied by the building footprint. And if you look at these neighboring properties on East Bay Street and Trad Street, you see very clearly that those building footprints exceed that 35% lot occupancy. All of these lots in that block have the same zoning of SR5, and it just happens to have a 35% lot occupancy. So that's not uncommon to have homes in these situations, these locations that do exceed that 35% threshold. And honestly, I think probably 50% is probably more reasonable in this particular area, because that seems to be a more reasonable lot occupancy given what's there, but it is 35%. And so here's the view looking from East Bay Street. Longitude Lane is right here, and this is the yard next to the house, and the lot that we're talking about is behind the house in that side yard. Another survey of the existing conditions. And this is the, so here we have the existing house on East Bay Street and its yard and a little parking court right here. And then we have the vacant lot and the proposed house footprint drawn by an architect. And so it's a little bit different site plan than you're used to, but basically this is the west wall of the house. And I've highlighted that 3-foot setback over here on that west side off of that drive, what is essentially a driveway that leads back to the East Bay Street property to the north. And then you have a 3-foot setback back here. There's no variance issue there. And then you have a very wide setback, 11 feet on the east side. The setback requirements for this lot are 3 feet on the east side and a minimum of 7 feet on the west side, a total of, I guess, 10 feet.
So
what they're asking for basically is to flip the side setbacks on this property, and allow that house to be closer to the west side property line, close to the east side property line where it could be situated. Again, taking advantage of the arrangement of houses in that area, and the fact that the neighboring property to the west is a driveway, not a building, not a lot, that area that would be used for a building. So so that's kind of illustrates the variance request that's before you. Then we have floor plans, of course, to illustrate what they're proposing to do. This is a single family home. This is the view from Longitude Lane. And this would be view from that, you're standing in the yard, Bay Street property. Next door, this would be the view. Then the view from the west side, so this is the side that would be encroaching into the side yard setback. Rear elevation here. So with a lot occupancy of 49%. And here's a view of that driveway next door. View of the lot. Letters of support from several neighbors. We have 5 Longitude Lane. I think that's 21 Longitude Lane. 23 Longitude Lane, 63 East Bay Street, 73 East Bay Street, 15 Trad Street. They're all the same letter indicating. And this is 17 Longitude Lane, 15 Longitude Lane. So those are letters of support from a number of the immediate neighbors in that area. And again, I think that, you know, the lot was created, it met the minimum lot size. The 35% is just a number, and it doesn't make sense in a lot of these cases in that area. So what they're asking for in terms of the lot occupancy really is more consistent with what the immediate neighbors around there have right now. And the setback variance is to flip it, not necessarily to put a bigger, larger footprint on the lot than would otherwise be permissible. So for those reasons, I think the variance request makes sense, and I think they meet the hardship test and recommend approval.
Thank you, Lee. Is there anyone who is here in opposition to the application for 2 Longitude Lane? Raise your hand, please. All right, is the applicant here this evening? Anything you'd like to say about your application?
That's been processed over.
Questions, discussion from the board? I did have one question. The setback variance next to the driveway, whose driveway is that? What property does it belong to?
I go back here.
73 East Bay.
73 East Bay.
It's this 73 East Bay is this house right here. Back and turns and
Okay.
driveway.
Do we have a letter of support in the file from that neighbor?
I believe 73 East Bay Street was one of those addresses.
He was fine with it. All there, so he liked the idea that he was gaining the 3 feet because Paul asked him to do. Like getting that little bit of breathing room.
So he'll have a little bit more space after the construction is completed.
And we do, this is the letter, I'm not sure what his name is.
Thomas Quadracci.
And could you just identify yourself for the record?
Yeah, I'm Michael Brewer, I'm the husband of the recorded owner of the building. Should we prefer not to speak?
Thank you, thank you. All right, any discussion, any questions? Do I hear a motion? Favor, please say aye. Aye. No opposed, so ayes have it, 4-0. Your variance is granted. Excuse, thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is B9, 1779 Opal Avenue, DuPont Station. EMS number 350-11-00-077, application number 2205-17-B9. Request variance from section 54-301 to allow a detached accessory building, 3-car garage with an 11-foot rear setback, 25-foot required. Zoned SR1, owners Kevin Martin and Sheila Warren. Applicant is Kevin Martin. Mr. Batchelder.
This is a residential property in DuPont Station neighborhood off Wapoo Road and Savannah Highway.
You see here the location of this lot on Opal Avenue. And you see this large area right behind the lot. So this is an open space area. It's not not even sure exactly who owns it. There's no designation on the county's property information system for an owner. It's a very odd situation. But anyway, it's an open space area that was created with these townhouse properties along Skinner Avenue. So it's not able to be developed because it's designated as being an open space area. And it is just a large vegetated area of land. And then you have these lots. These are the applicant's lot is quite large. It's just over a half an acre in size. So it's quite large. And here's a view of the aerial view of the property. What you notice right away is there's a large tree right here, and I'll have more photographs of that. So here's the zoning map illustrating the residential zoning that applies to the property. The building footprints that you see around the property. Application survey. This is the proposed site plan. So right now there's the one-story house right here. There's a metal garage building sitting here. The owner of the property purchased it not too long ago. I don't remember, that's within the last few years, I think. And there's this very large live oak tree right here, 63-inch diameter live oak tree. And then the proposal is to construct this 35 by 40-foot accessory building at the back corner of the property. Now, what you have is you have a drainage, basically a small canal that runs along the side of the lot and provides drainage along that side property from Opal Avenue all the way back to a larger canal right behind the property. So there's a chain link fence back here, and then the property line, and immediately on the other side of that, in this Willow Place common area, is a canal that carries drainage out. I think it goes to the right in this image. And so there's a lot of vegetation around those drainage features, and I'll have some photographs that kind of illustrate the existing conditions of how densely vegetated that back corner of the property is. And this is an aerial, again, of the properties submitted by the applicant. This is sort of an illustration showing the approximate location of the proposed garage that they would like to build 14 feet into the required 25-foot rear setback. The footprint of the garage is
A lot larger than what we could staff approve in that location. If it was
smaller and met our conditions of 600 square feet, it would be able to be approved, but
it's so large, it doesn't meet those conditions, and that's why it has to come before you for your approval. But you also see all the vegetation back here. So these are photographs submitted by the applicant. This is a front view looking down their existing driveway. This is that large tree, live oak tree back here in the backyard. View from the back corner towards the back corner of the lot, looking at the back of the house in this tree.
And another view of that tree. It's really a beautiful live oak. It's
very vigorous and healthy from all appearances. And
the way it grows up like that instead of looping down
towards the ground really is pretty striking. This is the back corner of the property that I was telling you about. So you have the small canal leading down from Opal Avenue over here, and then the large canal back here. Another view looking towards the side of the property. You can barely see the house, the roof house next door. Another view. Here. These are meant to illustrate, I think the applicant can explain these, but I think that he's illustrating where his proposed garage would be, the height of the proposed garage if he was to build it in different locations. This would be, I'm not sure, built with zoning variance. Okay, so basically garage footprint would be here if he was to build it within the building envelope and not seeking variance. But he would like to move it back 14 feet further, seeking the variance to allow that. So this is my photograph looking at the tree. You can see it's really quite impressive. Another view back in the yard. I think you could build this large 35 by 40 foot accessory building on the property within the building setbacks. In other words, no variance being required, and the applicant could do that. And my first impression when I looked at the site plan and the application was, well, that's what he needs to do because he's got plenty of room. There's no need for a variance. But the applicant is also proposing a large building, very tall, taller than the normal kind of accessory building. And you'll see that in the image. And so, and this is just another view of that back corner of the property. The light you see here is just the light reflecting off leaves. There are no buildings back there that you can see. So footprint, site plan, again, showing the 14-foot encroachment. Rear setback. This is what the applicant submitted the first time. And so a 14-foot tall eave is a very, very large accessory building for a residential property. So I looked at this and I thought, well, maybe the better thing to do would be to encourage the homeowner to reduce the overall height of this building, keep it more in line with what you find in a residential setting, and allow the setback with that condition that it be the reduced height. And so they have revised their plans and lowered the height. So the eave height on the corner is 11 feet, which is the number of the height of eave that we would allow in an accessory building that met the other conditions and could encroach into a side setback and rear setback. So that's where I came up with the 11-foot number. And then what they would like to do is turn it so that the gable runs parallel to the side property line, and then has 8-foot doors on both sides and a taller door in the middle.
And there is a property, I was reminded of the property on James Island that I can't remember the name of the street, but there was a situation where we had a large lot. We had a proposal to build a large accessory building in the back corner of the property. And that applicant was able to get the support of the surrounding neighbors. And it was an unusual application because of the size of the building. They wanted to be able to back their boat into this garage and keep it under cover. And the design was not in keeping with the typical accessory building that you would see, but it was pushed back on the property quite a ways. And looking at it, and I haven't been by in person, but I looked at it on Google Street View because this was a few years ago that we did that. I think Penny and I might have even gone out there. Did you go out there? Look at the lot?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I think
Well, I looked at the lot, but anyway, it looks good. You really don't pick up the fact that it's a large building that's so far back from the street. In this case, with the building situated into the rear setback, where I don't think it would ever be visible from anybody because there's no buildings around that area back there. There's a lot of vegetation. It's about 117 feet from overlap. That's from the property line. From the street itself, it would probably be another 15, 20 feet. Well, 15 feet. So, so that puts it about 130 feet back from the street. And I felt like, if the applicant was willing to reduce the height of the structure, I think it would be reasonable to support the variance. So that's where I'm coming from with my position on this. He does have the immediate neighbors on both sides and the neighbor across Opal Avenue that have signed these letters saying that they are this letter stands as my approval for Kevin Martin and Sheila Warren, the applicants, to encroach 14 feet into the rear setback. They didn't specify they want a 10-foot side setback, so that's what the applicant is proposing. Not proposing to encroach because there is that canal on that side of property line that is where the side property line is located. So they don't want to go too far over that direction. They have both side neighbors and 1782 local neighbor across the street in support, basically. West. So those were my thoughts on why I felt like this would be something I could support. That's my recommendation, but I think there's opposition, so.
Mr. Batchelder, so the hardship is the tree, the grand tree,
Well,
you're moving it on that
he
side
wants
to
to
protect the tree?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, he wants to give that tree more room. And I think you could build the garage within the setbacks, not require any variances and still not impact that tree. There might be a few limbs that have to be trimmed a little bit, but I don't think it would be too dramatic. It certainly wouldn't affect the viability of that tree, I think, in the future. It still would be a long ways away from the tree. So he's got a large yard. He can fit this building on the property. It would be closer to the street, quite a bit closer to the street. And so I felt like this was a better alternative than, of course, do that.
So the owner's not abandoning the existing drive. There's going to be two curb cuts, two drives.
I don't think he has plans to do that, but I'll let him speak to that.
All right, if there's anyone here in opposition to the application at 1779 Opal Drive, just raise your hand for me for right now. Okay, thank you, sir. We're going to get to you in just a moment. We're going to hear from the applicant first. He's here. Please stand up, take the podium, state your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you for the presentation. Yes, we are trying to keep very much in mind that tree about that house. And tree got the house along with it. It's named it. Actually named her. The first thing we did was we spent clear the tree areas around it before we did any house improvements. Clear that and allow that tree to grow to over 400 years old. The driveway is not going to be an actual concrete driveway. That make it look like it's this, but it's just going to be turf stone pavers that are into the ground. Allow water to seep in, and they're kind of like octagonal things with dirt in between. So really, when the grass grows, you won't see it. It'll just be the two pathways straight back, and then go to a small cement pad. Full cement garage, full cement driveway that's going to be pushing more water runoff into it either. Pavers that go back to the driveway, to the garage. Main focus is having that building, but then to make sure that to allow that growth, because we're taking things go on.
All right, thank you, sir. We'll hear from you again in just a moment. Sir, please come up and state your name for the record and address, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Charlie Smith. I live at 333 Wapu Road. I am objecting to the variance request on the basis that the tests have not been met. This morning, and I want to raise this issue, and I realize it's a livability issue, but it is germane to this application. This morning, there were 6 automobiles, a box truck, a boat, a trailer, and an aircraft engine in the front and side yard of this property. The neighbors around this property are very concerned that the addition of a garage, and particularly a 3-bay garage with an 11-foot door, is going to exacerbate what has become a livability issue for the neighborhood. It is absurd, the number of vehicles that are in front of this house, and we never had this problem earlier. But I can tell you that we've got concerns for storm runoff because the canal behind this house is in fact the Stono Park outflow, which goes directly into the marsh of the Stono River. The 36-inch galvanized pipe that runs from the end of Wapu Road straight into the marsh behind Getz Hall. It's worth noting that there is absolutely no activity compatible with SR1 zoning that requires an 11-foot garage door. We object to the use of an 11-foot door. There is no precedent in the neighborhood for a 3-bay garage, and particularly one that has any 11-foot door on it. Don't particularly have an objection to the building itself. Don't particularly have an objection to there being some accommodation for it. But the standard for the neighborhood is 2 bays wide. There are several that are double depth, which people use because they have automobiles that they store. But we have, I think I sent you all a copy of the Google map. You pull up this address, the aerial view of that shows 9 automobiles, 2 boats, a number of trailers, the box truck. I mean, it's really ridiculous, the number of vehicles that are kept on this property. And it makes us wonder if there's some other use of this property going on besides single family. It's just absurd to have this many vehicles. We wouldn't mind having some of those vehicles moved into a garage, but a 3-car garage is not solving a 6 to 12 vehicle problem, and in fact might be dramatically exacerbating the problem for the neighborhood. So we are concerned about it, and I just, I don't know what to do about livability. I contacted livability and asked what the actual use of the property was, and I've been referred, and it's appropriate, but I can't help but tie this livability issue to a zoning variance that's going to allow for a 3-car garage and the opening up of the backyard where there could be more cars there. I don't say that there will be, but it's just as likely as not that there will be. And if there's some way to ensure that this collection of vehicles is out of view of the street, I'd probably be a lot more supportive of this. I think at a minimum, we have got to ensure that there are not 2 driveways on this property because it is a tremendous problem as it is, and you're just opening up more property for the same situation to be exacerbated. So my request is denial today. If you do approve it, I would appreciate it if you consider 2 bays with 8-foot doors rather than any 11-foot doors of three bays. And I would appreciate some assistance of some type of agreement to prevent the exacerbation of this vehicle use on the property. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have some photographs for the record if you'd like.
Bring them on up there.
This is the aerial that I mentioned, and the other shots were taken this morning.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Martin, you have anything to say in response?
But I believe right now the issue is with the setback and not with the building itself. I know that was the variance I'm requesting. Size of that actually meets any other some understanding. I wanted to make sure that I understood a little bit what I heard. Never had 2 boats on there. Part of the reason I do want that 11-foot door is
They were parked perpendicular at the end of the driveway a week ago. One part.
I think because they're on the dress. I've never had 2 boats on the dress. I'm not sure. I'd like to be able to take a look at the pictures to validate that. But at this point, yes, I do have a RV vehicle that I've used. I'm going to be selling that here soon. I've got some work to do on one of the cars. I'm going to be selling that. My ideal thing is to have like arrows, like a Corvette. So I want to have 2 cars, one Corvette. So it'd be 3 cars total, but it's a project. It's a hobby. There's nothing more than just that. It's not a business. I don't wife had a car that she brought down from Newbern, North Carolina. Tags on it for that other. So I appreciate your concern that it looks like it's a lot of stuff going on there, but in fact, it's really not. It's like outside if I can at all avoid it. But 6 to 12 vehicles, and that's not something that would be. Fortunate enough and blessed to be able to work aspects within the industry. Nostalgic things to happen so that everything into something that's going to go. It's currently sitting on an open trailer. I don't know if that was what looked like a boat at one point in time. I can take a look at those pictures and see if that.
We'll be happy to furnish you copies of the pictures.
Okay.
Yeah.
At this point in time, I just want to reiterate there is just a request to move the building back. It is going to be sided with the same color as the house, and the driveway is not going to be a paved driveway. That's why it says the driveway to allow that so you see grass. It's not going to be. Advertised from the manufacturer, those pavers that you put in there, then the grass grows up through it and it's from the street.
All right, thank you, Ms. Martin. You may approach and I'll give you this set of photographs, and if you'll just hand it back to me when you finish reviewing them. And in the meantime, you can sit down and review those. And in the meantime, we'll, is there anybody else here to speak in favor or against this application this evening on open?
That's the same boat, just moved. It's the same boat, it just was parked there and then I moved it back further off the street.
All right, no other public comments, public hearings closed, discussion, questions? Yes, please. Yes, please.
So how many cars do you expect to park in your existing drive once you move?
I'm curious, is the metal building that's in the protected zone of the live oak going to remain, or will that be taken out at the same time the shed's taken out?
Back, it was there when we bought the house, we bought it on October 20. The shed was there. Much thought to that. It's on a concrete pad though, so.
Batchelder, what is the city's typical position about 2 accessory buildings? Happens, I'm just curious.
Well, there's no limit on the number of accessory buildings per se. There's a limit on how many we can approve, staff can approve that approach into a required side or rear setback. So on a lot this size with the rules we have, there's a lot of things you can do.
Mentioned this actual, so a normal storage would be okay without any approvals needed, is that right? You mentioned size, if this was scaled down.
If it was scaled down, then. And quite significantly, because this is quite large. Our limit for a building footprint is 600 square feet. And what we can approve, 600 square feet, 1.5 stories, deep height of 11 feet. And if you meet all those conditions, then yes, you can obtain a staff approval to and come as close as 3 feet off the side and rear property line. That building.
This is 1,400 square feet.
Ms. Martin, is there a neighborhood association that governs your neighborhood?
Voluntary Neighborhood Association.
Okay, what's the name of the neighborhood association?
Neighborhood Association.
A year and a half ago. So, not my name.
Chairman, they're a pretty active group. Actually tend to meet at church around the corner. March 11th. Former president this morning. President.
All right, I understand. My question was primarily trying to understand whether or not there was a neighborhood association that governed the use or restrictions upon the property. And it sounds like there's not. It sounds like that's the city's purview and not any individual neighborhood association. So I've gotten my question answered.
Does anybody on the board have any thoughts about whether or not the application of the ordinance
would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property?
No, I don't think that it does.
Building is a 1,400 square foot building, does appear to be a super adequacy for the site. During that size, it does open up an opportunity for additional usages of a building like that. Intent of that use, that kind of size could change. So got concern about the size of that. And the unintended consequence of that amount of space, being that the typical space is 600 square feet, that would be approved. That's more than double the size.
We're discussing, if we've got another question for you, do you have a question for the applicant, or are you just making some comments for discussion with the board?
I have a question.
I appreciate it.
Another question for the owner.
Yes, please.
Just to make sure we're addressing Mr. Smith's concerns about the storm. Whatever type of work you're doing, making sure that it doesn't reach that canal and the natural area surrounding it. Would there be any potential for that?
And putting gutter systems on that to direct that to make sure that run off as much as we can. And, if it were put back into the setback, then there's no lot size requirement based on the land, how much, I think it's 35. And total within the, so based on that, would have been driveway back is.
Mr. Martin, if you don't receive the variance tonight, is it your intent to construct the building within the setback area?
Yes, sir.
Lee, do you have a depiction of what that looks like again?
So here's the
11-foot eve height building that
the applicant agreed to. Here is the original
building that he applied for, showing the 14-foot eve and the 3 11-foot tall doors on the front, facing the front.
And can you, do we have a depiction of where it would show on an aerial overhead of the lot?
Well, not really.
Right there, those, I did have it strung out as to where it would be if I maintained within the setback.
Yeah, so you see this string moving
You had a good picture of it a minute ago. I did have to put it within the period of 25-foot setback. I would still put it to 11.
Instead of the reduced height that you're asking, 11-foot height.
I would go to the
there.
Here's the, I guess this would be the side.
Interior side of the building.
That's correct.
And Lee, it's the city's understanding and position that the applicant would not need a variance or other approval from this board in order to construct that accessory building.
That's correct.
Mr. Smith, does this have any impact on your opposition, the fact that he could build a building within the setback area? Yes, please.
I think there's a reasonable solution to this. I don't have the issue is that the only thing that I can address at this board today is the zoning issue. So I mean, that's kind of a yes or no situation. A 2-bay garage, even double depth, would probably not be an issue. And I wouldn't have a real objection to that being further into the setback. But a 3-bay garage, 1,400 square feet with 3 doors and one of them 11 feet tall is overwhelming, and there is zero precedent for that in the neighborhood. I think there's a way that we could work this out, that he would be, if he's using the garage for storage of his collector vehicles, then the double depth issue is not going to be a real problem. So I really, my fear is that if y'all deny the variance, I don't want the man to not be able to come back for a year. I don't know what the limitation is on that, or if there is one. But, we'd like to work this out, but in working it out, we want the livability issue addressed too, because we don't want a 1,400 square foot garage being built that's just going to add more automobiles and vehicles to this property. And the only thing I've got to work with is the zoning variance today. So if there's a way to work it out, that would be wonderful. I'm not trying to prevent the man from having a garage. You got to have a lot. I mean, I think it's a way to get it done, and I wouldn't really object to it being in the setback. But it needs to conform to what the neighborhood standard is at 2 bays wide, and it doesn't need to have 11-foot doors on it, and it needs to solve for it.
How visible is it?
Well, don't have a view of that, but back to the so here's a blow up. So there's vegetation out here a little bit, but you'd have a view from here, I don't know, over to here. Yeah, it depends on where you are. I mean, if you're at this spot right here, you'd have a view. If you're right here, there's going to be some vegetation. The house blocks it over here. So, but in this area, it seems like there would be a view.
It's about 11-foot view street.
Yeah.
And it seems like the owner is building to store the vehicles that are parked near that seem to be the issue. They would be moved from that. I know that's not part of the variance, but just still trying to address Mr. Smith's concern.
I think a 3-bay garage is a little large. Whether the setback is met or not is the building right on the lot without too much difficulty. I do think that removing the ornamental building would have a bigger benefit and impact to the tree, which is sort of appears to be one of the driving factors in this discussion. A garage, even extended back, may not address the needs.
And there were letters of support.
Yes.
On both sides.
Yeah. Both sides, and the homeowners directly across Oak Ave.
Who would have a view of
Right.
potential?
So when the city viewed this application and when you're looking at extraordinary and exceptional conditions, are you really thinking about the existence of that grand tree?
I think that's part of it, but it's not.
Because you can see, so if you pulled this garage forward to meet the setbacks, it would essentially come out to
Front of that concrete pad. You can see how much distance is between that corner and this tree. Now, the limbs are quite large and they do extend out. I can testify that.
So the ends of the limbs might have to be trimmed a little bit in that area. I don't know to what extent there would be
much impact on the tree, but you'd have to probably do a little bit of trimming. It is quite a large tree, and it's nice to be able to give it some room.
Sure.
All right, Mr. Smith, we definitely hear your concerns, understand them, and you understand that this is not a livability body. This is a body that is examining whether or not the applicant qualifies under the requirements for a variance. And so it's time to. Gather, do I hear a motion? All right, all in favor? Aye.
Is that with conditions?
Are there conditions?
Well,
There are
I was recommending the 11-foot eve height.
Maximum.
My apologies, I thought that was part of the application.
No, he agreed to change it after I went out there and met with him and said, that's the biggest thing that bothers me. I don't know what will happen to the cars and the boats.
I mean, nobody can know that for sure. If I was,
and I believe what he's saying is true, and he has a hobby, and, you'd want to keep him inside. You don't want to keep him outside. I'm a car guy from years ago, so I understand that things can happen that aren't good.
All right, Mr. Bennett, would you like to amend your motion?
With the stated condition of an 11-foot eve height.
Okay. All right, the motion is moving for approval of the variance with the condition of a 11-foot eve height. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. The variance is granted by a 3-to-1 vote.
Mr. Tibble still voted against the motion.
Mr. Goodwin.
Thank you.
All right, final item on the agenda. B10 860 Morrison Drive, TMS number 459-02-00-005. Application number 2205-17-B10. Request special exception under section 54-220 to allow a 150 unit accommodations use in a UPA, Upper Peninsula Accommodations Zone District. Owner is ODP Hotel Owner LLC. Applicant is DSM Real Estate Partners, CO Seaman Whiteside. Mr. Batchelder.
860 Morrison Drive is a commercial property on the east side of Morrison Drive, just south of the River Bridge overpass on Morrison Drive. And this map shows the actual parcel that we're dealing with tonight. It's they own two parcels, the larger parcel next to it on the south side, and then this parcel.
this property is where the hotel
is proposed. And here's an aerial view of the property. The property to the north, although it looks like marsh or something, is actually owned by Charleston Water Service. And this is where I believe the shaft maybe for conveying sewage to the tunnel system on the peninsula has a connection point here to the tunnel, bringing it from Manual Island. Could be wrong about that, but they own that property. And they have restrictions on what happened there. And so that's not the property in question. The property in question is here, and then they own this piece. And you'll see in the plans, there's a easement shown over here for access, vehicular access across that neighboring property into this hotel property. And it's zoned UP, it's within the accommodations overlay zone, which entitles someone to come before the board and seek a special exception to build a hotel. That's a requirement for building any hotel in the city, is to come before the board. And so what we ask for is a written response to the requirements of that special exception test, which is quite long. And then we ask for building plans to illustrate exactly what they're proposing to build. Now, these are conceptual plans that change as they go through the process, but conceptually, where do all these different uses within the building fit? The parking, the lobby, the bar, the restaurant, other amenities, and the rooms, and how tall is it? That sort of thing. So you'll see all that information in here. I'm not going to go through this written summary because I'm recommending approval of this request. I think they've met all the requirements. And the applicant may want to touch on some of these things. They've made the one change that I asked for concerning the narrative. And so that'll be part of the record. And I can't even remember what it relates to because I've been so focused on other things today. James will remind me of that, I'm sure. And then here's the illustrations to help illustrate the proposal. So site plan survey. Here's the site plan. So you come off of Morrison Drive through this drop-off vehicular driveway area into the property. There's a valet station, and then they have a system on site to provide all the required parking. They might even be able to work out an arrangement with the Commissioners of Public Works to put the parking over, or some of it over on that neighborhood property. But for now, the plans show all the parking being on site. And this illustrates the circulation of vehicles. And they provide these detailed plans. These are the plans illustrating the parking system and other amenities, meeting space. There's a requirement for meeting space based on the size of the building. These are elevations, conceptual elevations, just showing what they might end up with here. And larger scale plans. I'm not going to go through these in real detail because I don't want to belabor the point, but you see here the first four uses: cafe, back of house type things, lobby, that sort of thing. And then meeting space, again, that meeting space is a requirement, meeting that requirement, meeting the meeting space requirement. They have fitness areas, rooms, more meeting space, and then these are photographs of surrounding conditions. There are no residential areas immediately adjacent to this property. There is a residential area near it, but it's across Morrison Drive. And so there's a big space between those two properties, and it's not really residential right up to the corner of that residential zone property. It's set back further from that corner closest to this property. And then this is a drawing that just is required to illustrate the surrounding uses. And you see in blue here, residential uses in the neighboring, within 500 feet of the property. There are lots of commercial uses, and again, that residential is across Morrison Drive, so that's quite a barrier between those two uses. That's it. So long and short of it, they meet the requirements in my opinion, and I'm recommending approval of this request.
All right, is there anyone here tonight who is in opposition to agenda item B10 for 860 Morrison Drive for the hotel approval? If you're here in opposition, please raise your hand. All right, nobody's here in opposition tonight. Do we have anybody from the applicant?
It's James Wilson on behalf of the applicant. We've got a full team here and we will not have everybody speak.
Thank you.
We have Matt White with DSM Equal Six Partners. We've got Eric Garris with Fellow Garris, the architects, with Jennifer Beal with the Seaman Whiteside here with us. What I'd like to do very quickly, and Ms. Grass is used to this, is we would like to quickly run through criteria only because record that the just on to understand the context of the property, and I'll ask Mr. Garrison quickly to run through the plans quickly, but context is that office, retail, apartments. Property was city council within the accommodation base district, but it's also the accommodation district. Last year, city council considered and decided, yes, we think this is an improvement.
Was there a rezoning application that was necessary for that?
Yes, because the property was not originally within property. The hotel is not already with accommodations overlay. Zoning process have added, and a number of properties in on that, just a handful really. But it does have to be approved by city council like into. Yes, we support this site for.
Were there any votes against approving the rezoning?
It's unanimous. I think it was unanimous at council. And planning and construction.
Thank you.
Sir. And also the ownership and have been with the neighborhood and then. With that said, let me let Mr. Harris very quickly run Mr. Batchelor. We can just perfect. You already did. Just take us through.
My name is Eric Garris with Fellow Garris Architects. Thank you, Mr. Batchelor, for your patience in this submittal. It's certainly been an interesting project to work on thus far, being that it's one of the first, I think, Upper Peninsula hotels of this scale, and it deserves a little attention. So what you see here is basically the site plan provided by Hampton Stevens with Seaman Whiteside, and it shows the loading and drop-off area that's going to be centralized in our project, and then the valet staging. If you can go through the next slide. What you see, I'm going to go through these really quickly. We have a basement level that accommodates all the parking that's required on site, to include all the employee parking as well. And then it's a parking carousel that takes you down. The majority of public space is on the ground level along Morrison Drive, with the back of house space being centered interior to the site so that we don't put anything up front in the street. On the second level, we have the majority of the meeting space that's required. It's 500 square feet per or 400 square feet per room. And so we've decided to put that on the second level because it connects great to the ground level. The third through eighth levels are all of our guest rooms to make up our 150 room count. And then on the ninth level, we have a smaller meeting space on the roof with a dining and check-in, and then a pool deck that overlooks the east side of the site towards Mount Pleasant, keeping that away from Morrison Drive overlooking the neighborhood. So we were trying to be sensitive with respect to the neighboring properties across Morrison Drive to keep the activity that might happen, you know, within a pool area kind of more private interior to the site. If you go to the next slide, one last thing. So we provided the elevations as requested in the ordinance. You can see it's a 9-story hotel. Hopefully it would be, you know, well received by the BAR, being that it would speak well to the properties that are under development now at Morrison Yard. That's pretty much it.
Thank you, Mr. Garris.
So I will just quickly run us through the criteria so that the board will have considered the points that you're supposed to, just to consider for the approvals. No housing units will be or exist, and so no housing units are being eliminated. No office space is being, storefront retail is being displaced by the project. The project will not significantly increase traffic in residential neighborhoods because directly on Morrison Drive with good access down the peninsula and up without the need to cross through any residential neighborhood accesses. We believe it will contribute to a diverse mixed-use district because we do have a good combination of other uses. The office building that's going up right next door, as well as more residential being built further down. The amount of bar and restaurant area is well below the total 12% limitation requirement of the code that bar and restaurant alcohol serving areas do not exceed 12% of your total interior space. This would only be the drop-off area, as Eric described, it's off of Morrison Drive, of course. It's within the site. There's an access driveway, shared driveway easement, and then the vehicles onto the site or parked on the site. We see a minimum of 10 sleeping units, 150 proposed rooms. We will not share any buildings or structure or facilities with any other hotel operation. The meeting space will meet minimum required rooms. Will not result in more than 8 full-service hotels on the peninsula. This technically would not be a full service. More than that. It will, of course, contribute to the city's affordable workforce housing fund, as all new hotels. Other points for the board to consider: the vehicle trips generated. There's actually a traffic analysis that's provided. Analysis. Morrison properly, and there's actually as part of the not this project but the other Morrison Yard project, there is actually an agreement of Johnson. Have blocked down. The distance from the nearest arterial road, that's Morrison Drive, so it's right on that. The lane uses within 500 feet, as we've talked about, are residential, office, restaurant, other commercial uses. There are no other accommodations within 5. Mr. Batchelder already addressed the proximity of residential districts, which are separated by Morrison Drive.
Let me ask you one thing about that real quick. Is there any pedestrian access across Morrison Drive in that area, any crosswalk, stoplight?
Mr. Bearden can actually explain that better, but yes, there is going to be improved connectivity across Morrison Drive with new crosswalks, I believe. And that's part of the overall plan for Morrison Yard, is to create better connections. And with that signal, and I don't know exactly when that signal comes, but in the coming years, I think that also improves the pedestrian connectivity across Morrison Drive for residents and other commercial uses on that side to access the.
Yeah, that's correct. There's no pedestrian access.
Sorry. Yeah.
Zach Bearden, the Origin Development Partners, master developer for the project. And when we acquired the first portion or first phase of Morrison Yard, we noticed there were no sidewalks in the adjacent housing authority property. That was one of the things we first wanted to address. The large space that Mr. Batchelder described that is Morrison Drive, that is 5 lanes, is a very big boundary for people crossing the road. So there's no safe way to cross. So we will have a new traffic signal at the Johnson Street intersection. There's already an agreement in place with SDOT. There will be new crosswalks there. There's a new pedestrian connection to the bridge, the Arthur Avenue Bridge, and we're working on a new public park at much improved pedestrian access.
Thank you.
There are just very few remaining points. The accessory uses, the only accessory uses we have are the restaurant on the 9th floor. And those we expect to serve mainly hotel guests and maybe some adjacent. Well, significant impact. The Wall Street parking meets the requirements, 2 spaces for so 100 spaces. In addition to those 100, we have 17 on parking for employees. One of the requirements of the code is employees, and we'll do 3 things there. One is the 17 additional parking spaces. Another is that we will provide partly subsidized supported transit passes, party passes, 3 transit, and then we'll have bike storage as well for employees who are. As Mr. Batchelder mentioned, though, I do want to hit this point. We have had conversations with CPW, Commissioners Public Property, that would potentially allow us to create space into the property. So that area where you pull in to the building for parking, you can actually potentially, if this gets worked out, pull through and have parking up here with a long-term. So there's a potential that could be partly or wholly substitute as parking. It would have distances. Not aware of any industrial uses with hazardous materials within 500 feet. The developer is committed to environmental sustainability and recycling. The property is well situated, we think, for access to city attractions, and a shuttle will be provided for guests. There are artist stops, actually new ones that will be developed. That was the one Mr. Batchelder. There's a provision in the ordinance going through the TRC that So that is actually part of this overall. Of course, in your development. And the owner, of course, is committed to make affirmative good faith efforts to see the construction procurement opportunities are available to minority business enterprises, women-owned business enterprises. Affirmative good faith efforts to hire personnel representatives of the population. All employment levels. That we would all be certainly glad to answer any questions, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Is anybody else here that's not with your group that wants to speak in favor of this application? The residential adjacent to, or on the, it's not adjacent, I guess it's on the other side of Morrison. All the blue dots, is that all city-owned housing?
I believe it is housing authority property.
Okay.
Yes.
None of that is owned by a private individual.
No.
The parking alternative that he mentioned on the CPW site, does the application qualify without the additional parking through CPW?
Yes.
Anybody have any other questions, discussion?
What's the adjacent development that's on the lot on some of the south? All right, it was on the site plan.
Parcel.
Yeah, is that a separate parcel?
Right, okay,
I'm sorry.
This is a separate parcel that is, at the moment, you know, it's intended mostly residential development ultimately, but that's not part of this.
Thanks for clarifying that. I didn't realize it was a separate parcel.
At the end of Morrison Drive, there's some flooding. Has that been addressed?
Yes, so about 2 years ago, Frank Newham with the city's engineering department actually installed check valves on several storm pipes that would be surcharged at high tide events. He also constructed a small berm along the dip in Morrison Drive, and since then we've seen very little to no sunny day flooding. There have been instances where there's been construction work that caused some problems, but other than that, it's pretty much eliminated over years. We all had to navigate.
And we don't think that this improvement will add any additional water.
No, the existing site is mostly impervious, and so we will be working within that impervious footprint. But in addition to that, site is adjacent to a receiving water body, so we can treat for water quality and then get it out as fast as possible, so you don't have any flooding.
As it relates to the housing authority owned property, and I do commend you for as far as the residents and the tenancy of the property, is there any efforts to include them in opportunities that are going on the site right now?
There are definitely efforts. One of the things that we've discussed with some of the community leaders that represent the individuals that live in the actual Charleston Housing Authority properties is doing a job fair, both during the construction phase and then long-term for the operation of the hotel and what could be the future phase of this project. A lot of coordination with individual community leaders there, but also through the neighborhood groups, the ECDC. And there's also another Eastside community group that's not official.
Well, understanding also the history and the culture of the Eastside community and where the property is located at, and a great presentation. Is there any thought process to how a visitor might come and see the history and the culture as soon as they walk onto the site?
Yes, that's actually something we discussed briefly today, that maybe that's incorporated into the branding. One of the things we're doing, and this goes beyond this site, but to answer your question, is that we identified that the rail spur that was formerly operated by the Seaboard Railway is used by a lot of the citizens. And so we are able to put that under contract. We should close in the next month, purchase that from the Port Authority, but to create a public park. It's already used as a fishing pier, but it will be a gift, back to the public that's already accessed that for years to come. So I think there's some things we could incorporate into the project itself that speaks and incorporates aspects of the existing community.
I hear from Ms. Beal on the traffic issues.
Hi, Jennifer Beal
Yes.
with Beal Engineering.
Thanks. And if you could just please just summarize your findings. I think sometimes traffic studies be a little bit labored for me at least to read.
So we looked at the site and looked at the 150 hotel rooms. Those hotel rooms we look at daily, and we also look at AM peak hour, which is 1 hour between 7 and 9 in the morning. And then we look at PM peak hour, which is 1 hour between 4 and 6 in the afternoon. And so those are our two, the AM and PM peak hours, what we look at. We looked at the intersections, this will be aligned with Stewart Street. So we looked at that intersection and looked at the traffic flow expected in and out, as well as the site, the hotel. So the traffic study actually includes both parcels, not just the hotel parcel, but the hotel parcel is projected to have approximately 68 trips in the morning, 38 entering, 30 exiting. That's over the entire hour. So that would be how many, and then 83. So those folks will come out. It will have a dual lane exit, so people going left, and so it'll be there's one lane in and 2 lanes out. And those folks will be able to exit out full access, and that has been coordinated with the department.
Is the review and approval of the Department of Transportation necessary for you to construct this project?
As the process goes, as this goes through, this traffic study will be reviewed at TRC by the city, and then when the encroachment permit is pulled for the driveway construction, the DOT.
Yes, and then they will review it and decide whether or not to approve it at that point.
Correct. The only recommendation from the study is to incorporate the transit accommodations ordinance, which I think we pointed out, is that that would be required as part of the coordination, and then of course always coordinating the driveway with the city, the driveway details, radius.
Any other questions for Ms. Beal while she's up here? Thank you. Anybody have any further questions or discussion? Motion? Question.
No conditions, just approval on my part. My recommendation.
All right, is there a second?
Have a second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. All right, the ayes have it, 4-0. Your special exception is approved. Thank you very much for your time. No further business. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
agrees that